Good morning and good afternoon to everyone. Thank you so much for joining us at the showcase here at the European Spectrum Management Conference. I'm Kelly Emmerich, and I serve as the Executive Director of the Ultra Wideband Alliance. And I'm pleased to share the stage today with three amazing innovators and entrepreneurs that have been invaluable in the development of UWB and are leading the way to the UWB future. Dag Wisland, the CTO and co-founder of Novelda. Jean-Marie Andre, who is the head of UWB products at STM Micro, and Luke Darman, who is the Senior Director of Secure Technologies Business Unit at Qorvo. We have an outstanding panel today, and we're going to get into a discussion with a series of questions. But before we do that, I wanted to just provide a quick overview about Ultra Wideband and the Ultra Wideband Alliance. And if we could just go to the next slide, that would be great. So the Ultra Wideband Alliance was founded in 2018 as the voice of the UWB industry, really focused on regulatory issues around the world. The team that founded UWBA worked to develop products starting back in 2000, and they led the IEEE 802.15.4z standards development process. The UWB Alliance has 30 international companies in UWB silicon, module manufacturing, real-time location services, consumer electronics, automotive, and transportation. We have liaison agreements with many other organizations, including FIRA and Omlox and WinForum. So we work cooperatively to ensure that there's a wonderful environment for UWB to flourish. We have international offices headquartered in Washington, D.C., Silicon Valley, and Europe. And we'll move on to the next slide. And why UWB is become so critical in the last couple of years is this chart really shows that. And this is a market survey done by TSR, and they're a market research group showing the development of UWB and what we're anticipating the growth. Right now, there's 500 million UWB consumer devices in circulation. And the expectation is by 2025, we're going to see 1 billion devices per year. So that really leads us to where does UWB fit in the radio ecosystem? So if we could move on to the next slide. These are just some of the UWB use cases that have been developed so far. We're anticipating there will be many more. Looking at applications like Find My Stuff associated with the smart tags that are being offered by Apple and Samsung. Also, keyless entry for automotive has been a very large area of interest. Emerging radar applications that we're going to talk about a little bit more in this panel today. AR and VR really is an important area because of the precise location capabilities that UWB offers. Also secure payment. And then looking at some of the healthcare applications and coming out of the pandemic, of course, contact tracing has been an incredible application for UWB because, again, of that precision. And we'll move on to the next slide. This slide just shows as consumer devices begin to incorporate UWB, they're also incorporating multiple technologies. And so this ecosystem is very complex. A lot of these consumer devices are looking at ways to share the radio frequency and make sure that the right technology is used for the right job. So we see here, we have UWB, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth BLE, NFC, and GPS being incorporated into multiples in these devices. So how does that radio ecosystem work together? And that's really what we've been focused on as an industry, is how are we while we're providing a very interesting and capable technology, how do we share the space with others? Moving on to the next slide. I'd like to now introduce Dag Wisland, who's the CTO and co-founder of Novelda, to give us an overview of Novelda and tell us a little bit more about himself. Dag, welcome.
So thank you, Kelly, for the nice introduction. So I will briefly introduce Novelda and also some words about our products and technology. So Novelda is a ultra-wideband sensor and semiconductor company making modules and chips for ultra-wideband ranging radar sensing applications. What you see here is our most recent module. It's a 3 by 30 millimeter human presence sensor module where the X4 SoC is the core component. And this module is kind of taking benefit of ultra-wideband opportunities to have some nice features. So it's really good at detecting small movements. We are measuring, the way we measure presence of humans is through detecting respiration activity and also to some extent heartbeat from a remote distance. It's also very ultra responsive due to low latency in the way ultra-wideband works. It offers also very high precision ranging, which is a key benefit of ultra-wideband as a general technology, combined with low power consumption. And also what is important for consumer products is also the low impact on product design. It will radiate through plastics, encapsulation, and glass, etc., so you can hide it completely. Moving into applications, currently focus has been mainly on human presence detection, detecting people in front of a device, exemplified by the X1 Nano series from Lenovo, where we have our device installed. But we also have a lot of other interesting use cases. And this is sensing. It's not based on tags and tracking. It's a quite different application than we will present later on. So spatial contextual mapping is one thing where you want to understand the surroundings, positioning and tracking of people without tags, classifying and detecting different objects in your surrounding, and also last but not least, measuring health and biometric parameters for humans. And the last one has been very useful in some COVID-19 applications where respiration sensing has been using our technology for monitoring patients. And the good thing about this is also that even though you offer quite, I would say, good performance in use case, we are only radiating at very low power levels, far below the minus 41.3 dBm per megahertz set by the ultra-wideband restrictions. So thanks. I will then hand the word over, I guess. Thank you.
Oh, well, thanks, Dag. That was a great overview. We'll move on to the next slide, and I'd like to introduce Jean-Marie Andre, who is the head of UWB products at STM Microelectronics. Jean-Marie, welcome to the stage.
Hi, Kelly. That's great to hear what is done with ultra-wideband. It's absolutely fantastic. So I hate this picture because it tells my age. So now I'm not ashamed to say that I've been in the smartphone business more than 25 years ago and for more than 15 years. And over these times, I figure out, and it's the equivalent of Moore's law, but in the radio context. And it tells that every 18 months, there is one new antenna that is popping on a mobile phone or a smartphone. And when we realized that and we looked what was the future of radio, it was kind of obvious that ultra-wideband would eventually make it to the smartphone. When we created BSpoon in 2010, our assumption was that by 2015, it would be on a smartphone. Of course, when you're embarking on this kind of adventure, you're always optimistic, and eventually it was 2019. But yet it arrived there, and it opens such a fantastic possibility in terms of all the devices that are going to surround the smartphone. And it provides something which is just unparalleled in terms of distance measurement and robust and reliable distance measurement. So it's very exciting. And what we developed with BSpoon drew the attention of ST Micro last year, and we became part of the ST Micro group, more specifically the STM32 group, where our duty is to bring ultra-wideband as one of the numerous radios that can enhance STM32's ecosystem and will help build fantastic devices around the smartphone.
Wonderful. Wow. Thank you so much for joining us, Jean-Marie. That was a great overview and a good history. I'd also like to welcome to the stage Luke Darman, the Senior Director of Secure Transactions Business Unit at Qorvo. Luke, welcome to the stage.
Thanks, everybody, and thanks for your time here. So we have a very similar story as the one Jean-Marie just told us. I was part of the executive team of DecoWave. DecoWave was the pioneer in the ultra-wideband technology, and particularly the so-called impulse radio ultra-wideband. So we basically invented the technology, and we created this market, which is now going to be a multi-billion market and adopted by the whole industry, which is a great endeavor and a great adventure that is going to have a very happy ending. So DecoWave was the pioneer in IR UWB and created the IEEE 802.15.4a standards, and then contributed to a large extent to the 15.4z standard, which was adopted by companies such as Samsung, Apple, NXP, Continental, BMW, and others. Sorry, I forget the other names, but a large panel of the industry. DecoWave was acquired about a year ago by a US company called Qorvo being specialized in RF front-end for mobile phones, but everything which is basically RF technologies for communications. So since then, we have been working on two different aspects of the UWB market. My group is in charge of the mobile phone and secure transactions, everything which is related to mobile phone as an infrastructure. And we have another group working on so-called IoT, which is everything else, basically, including consumer electronics, industrial IoT, RTLS, real-time location systems, and so on. So if we look at the mobile phone as the infrastructure for accessories and different objects to interact with, we see that once the UWB technology is in the mobile phone, and as Jean-Marie described, it was a key milestone for the industry to take off really, in large volumes. Once you have this in the mobile phone, and the first company doing that was Apple with the iPhone 11, then you can open a lot of different use cases, which are either secure use cases or non-secure use cases. When we talk about secure, we're talking mostly about access control, secure transactions like payment, for example. Imagine opening your house with your phone right now in a secure way. Communicating in a secure way for social networks with your friends, for example, opening your car. But also when talking about non-secure use cases, we can think about what has been already mentioned, like tags, finding my valuables, locating them, retail system, finding the objects I'm looking for in a supermarket, for example, all these kind of different things. Thank you, Kelly.
Luc, thank you so much for that overview. And again, the history here is very, very interesting as UWB has come into the mainstream. And that really leads into our first question. I'm so delighted to be here with three folks that have been entrepreneurs in this space, who have been innovators in this space, and have really seen the growth as we've moved through these milestones, as you just mentioned, the iPhone 11 coming out and incorporating UWB. So I wanted to jump in here and start with the first question. UWB has been around for a while, about 20 years or so, and it's only made it to the mainstream in the last couple of years. So what changes have each of you seen with respect to your various markets since UWB has gone mainstream, so to speak? And I'll start it off with Dag.
Yeah, thank you, Kelly. So let me... Yeah, well, I think as both Luc and Jean-Marie, we have been in this business for a very long time. And also remember, I think the early days where it was about high-speed communication. Going through the phase of, I would say, focusing on maybe more niche applications, low-volume applications, but certainly we now see this really, really great change that wideband is moving from being maybe considered a bit immature to be really, really high volume and a really beneficial technology. So I think what we have seen is more greater awareness of ultra-wideband as a technology, and in particular the benefits that comes with it. And what I would say is, of course, people understand that fine ranging is now a really good feature that comes with ultra-wideband. It's quite a unique feature. Also, we have seen that we now get, I would say, the ecosystem is growing. That's also really interesting. We see that we get potential access to a much larger ecosystem through the access of these devices, and it's going into a higher volume application like the iPhone. And also from a regulatory point of view, we recently went through a campaign where we certified our module in about 100 countries. And during that period, iPhone came, and we now see that it's much easier to get access to smaller countries not in the past aware of ultra metal. So some points here. So I think that was at least a start for me.
Thanks, Dag. Luke, do you want to jump in on that?
Sure. So I think, as Dag mentioned, a few years ago, I mean, like you mentioned 20 years ago, Kelly, that's true. I mean, UWB was perceived as a potential competition to Wi-Fi for data communication at a point. And it was done, in a way where, it couldn't go through. I think what has made a big difference, is when we started looking at UWB and the technology and the benefit of the large bandwidth, not in terms of data transmission or communication, but in terms of time domain, where we could actually measure the time of flight in a very precise way. And so not looking at the frequency side, but more looking at the time domain side. And once you do this, you start doing very cool things like, measuring the distance. When you measure the time extremely precisely, extremely accurately, then you can say, well, I can measure the distance. And when you measure a distance, not only precisely or accurately, but also reliably, means repeatedly, then suddenly you can open a large scope of different applications and brand new applications. And I think this is exactly what happened with the 15.4a and 15.4z standard, where basically time of flight become the measurement as opposed to frequency spectrum, right? And that, I believe, created the disruption in the market where people started to find the interest in the different use cases.
Yeah, very interesting. And Jean-Marie, would you like to add to that?
Yes, it's very interesting. The initial question was about what has changed recently, and I think the Apple announcement that all of us were aware of, or at least were feeling was about to come, has totally modified the perception of the market about ultra wideband. Because I think Luke and I, we are sharing this history of going to a prospect and customer and telling them how wonderful it is to have ultra wideband, and people a bit doubtful about, yeah, but maybe I could do that in Wi-Fi or with Bluetooth or these kind of things, and trying to explain the benefit of the time domain thinking that comes with ultra wideband. And when Apple eventually released this product, where they designed their own chip, and God knows that when you embark on the design of this kind of chip, it's not coming for free. So that's not the kind of thing, even with the deep pockets of Apple, when you decide to dedicate some brain to something, it must be because this something creates a lot of value. And all of a sudden, we saw a switch in the discussions we were having with the people around us, and it was no longer about the benefit of ultra wideband, but it was more a question of when they would see the price decrease, the price erosion that comes with consumer application, which of course is very important. Until this advent, consumer applications were quite scarce. There were a lot of applications of ultra wideband in the sport tracking business, in the real-time location systems that may be used in the industrial environment. And in these places, it was quite easy because people could measure the benefit of getting precise location indoors. So it's something that could be sold. But in other areas, it was really a question of make or break. And now, what this has totally changed is the fact that it is a serious technology, which is considered as serious by all the players. And we can see very decent sized companies like Corvo, like STMicro, who are investing heavily into this to make it available to a mass market. So what it brings is incredible in terms of opportunity. And it reminds me, and that's something I would like to share with you. Remember 25 years ago when there was no GPS? How could we live today without a GPS? There would be no company like Uber, for example, just to name one. So there are fantastic opportunities that are lying ahead of us. And it's great to live these things. And we can see that through the various discussions we're having with all these areas where the spectrum regulation is discussed, where interoperability is discussed. There is a lot of work that is going on in this business, and it's quite incredible. And I'm so grateful that the three of us, we are in this situation, the four of us with you, Kelly, sorry, we're in this situation where we are on the front seat. And we were there first, and we can see it happening, and it's wonderful. It's an achievement.
So incredibly gratifying to see the market finally take off. And Jean-Marie, I just want to follow up on what you said, because it was so interesting. The applications that you talked about, the sports tracking, the industrial applications, those really were not consumer focused applications. And so would you characterize this announcement from Apple as really opening up the consumer market in a way we haven't seen before?
It has, and definitely some of the works that have been done in industrial environment to track assets and stuff like that have a total meaning in the consumer market. But there is also the other way around. What the consumer market brings to industrial application is price erosion. And today, what is at stake in industrial tracking is to find a way to define tracking systems that are industry grade, but that come at the price of a consumer device. And we're about to crack this thing with a number of initiatives, and this is going to ignite a number of applications, and that will make ubiquitous the availability of precise location. Actually, it's as if we were opening the ceilings of all the factories for precise tracking systems. So very, very interesting indeed.
Thank you. That's great. I'm going to move on and talk a little bit about, a reference to the slide earlier about multiple technologies being utilized in different devices. It seems there's a trend towards adding UWB into devices where they are complementary to Wi-Fi or Bluetooth. And as they are coming together and UWB is providing a specific purpose in those devices, can each of you tell us more about how you see UWB as an essential ingredient in the emerging multi-radio ecosystem? And Luc, I'll start with you this time.
Okay, so we've been seeing actually a lot of different trends. When we started pitching UWB, as a technology that could replace the other technologies about 12 years ago, people were looking at us like, nothing is going to displace Bluetooth, for example, right? So Wi-Fi was a given, obviously. It's going to be, the goal was not data communication in any case, but Bluetooth provides pairing, basically linkage, right? And why not, doing linkage with ultra wideband? Then suddenly we realized that, in fact, the two technologies are very complementary. The goal of ultra wideband was really to give time of flight at first. The pairing itself could be done by Bluetooth because it was everywhere. Okay, so leveraging the BLE or Bluetooth technology was a no-brainer. So if we look, for example, at a Car Connectivity Consortium of FIRA, what is being done there is actually exactly this, which is the pairing will happen with BLE and Bluetooth, and then the ranging will actually be performed by UWB. And we can look at this from a BLE perspective. So clearly BLE or Bluetooth Classic will actually be combined with UWB. You can think about Wi-Fi as well, because when we want to do ranging plus high data, right? Then in this case, BLE is not enough, and you want to go for Wi-Fi, right? But it's not only radio technologies. You can think about also sensor technologies like accelerometers, for example. When you do, if you want to do indoor GPS, for example, Accelerometers are very good for dynamic or movement. As soon as it's static, it starts drifting, and you have to recalibrate the sensor. UWB is actually very good to recalibrate the sensor. So it's very good at static measurement and also dynamic measurement. So you can actually combine the two technologies in a very clever way so that you can do sensor fusion.
Right. Very interesting. I'd like to ask Dag if he'd like to respond to this.
Yes, I'll do that. So yeah, I think like Luke is saying, the big important step is that we, instead of kind of fighting the other technologies, we join them. We utilize the unique benefits from the different technologies in a good way. And as Ole said, I think what is the big selling point for wideband is, of course, the ranging capabilities, the ability to do accurate ranging. And this is something both utilized within the RTLS ranging space, but also as we in Novelda are doing in the sensing space. We're using the exact same benefit of technology, the time of flight. It's a coherent system, and it's able to really precise measure things. It's like any other technology out there. I think also one thing that's interesting is the non-interfering operation of the wideband. It may appear as kind of threatening because it's a wideband technology, but looking at the power levels, it's something that makes it possible to deploy large number of devices without make disturbing and interfering with other technologies. I think that's one thing that we will see in the future also, when the number of installed devices even increase from what we have today. Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Dag. Jean-Marie?
Yes, we are talking of the interaction between ultra-wideband and possibly other radios. And there is something that I've always been puzzled when we build location networks, especially in industrial environment. We build synchronous networks. And there is a very high level of synchronization between the fixed parts that are tracking the objects. Sometimes we call them anchors, sometimes we call them satellites. They are fixed, and they are picking the signals that are sent by the tags around to locate them. And they can do that because they are highly synchronized. And the level of synchronization we are achieving between those satellites is a few parts per billion, a few ppbs. And if you look at what it means in terms of precision, it's about the equivalent of an atomic clock. And actually, we are using it exactly the same way as a GPS satellite up in the air, because those GPS satellites, they have atomic clock, which allows actually the GPS receivers to understand exactly how long it took for the signal to fly from the satellite down to the receiver. And I suspect this will be helpful in other radio systems where a high level of synchronization will be needed. Just think of synchronous handovers in cellular networks. If you're able to manage to have all your transmission points synchronized with this high level of synchronization, then a lot of use cases will become available, and it will be very interesting to watch.
Thank you. This synchronization. Ooh, getting some feedback. Sorry. Better. Okay. The synchronization and the capability that provides is really going to expand opportunity. You mentioned GPS, Jean-Marie, in your comments, and I want to move on to the question of a topic that we hear about a lot recently, and how can UWB provide GPS augmentation? Following the release of the smart tags and the consumer market, how are these devices going to transform our lives as we look at other ways, including augmenting GPS? So Jean-Marie, I'll throw it back to you to kind of expand on that a little bit more.
Well, it's obvious that having the capability to pick some signals indoors and compute your own location opens an avenue of interesting prospects, especially in the consumer business. So if you think of people who are wandering in shopping malls or wherever, any kind of store, they can get to know precisely where they are. They can get to know where they can meet. They know where their kids are, and And at the same time, if they decide that they want to make this information available to the host, then the host is able also to suggest what are the places that should be visited by these guys. So there are so many ways to leverage this that it's extremely interesting. And for the moment, in our brain, it is known that when we are entering into a building, we can no longer rely on GPS. And to a certain extent, we are kind of lost. So there are things that we would be doing outdoors that we don't do indoors, which is a shame because we're spending 75% of our times indoors. So imagine what is going to happen the day where we eventually manage to harness this capability. And I believe it's just about to happen.
Dag, do you want to follow up on that? I know you have been actively involved in some of the healthcare related applications and others.
Yes, so I think Novelda is kind of looking at this in a bit different view because we are a sensor company and not, I would say, RTLS communication company. And I see very strongly the benefits of be able to track movement indoor using GPS-like functions. But also, I think, in our point of view, offering the sensor function, what we see is also in situation where you want to do like autonomous devices, etc. It could be very interesting also to add to the location also the ability to sense surroundings or passive objects, the context, and these things. And I think it's great benefit to really combine functions offered by ultra-wideband and also enhance the technology in making lives easier, like, for instance, smart cities, smart parking lots indoors, as mentioned, shopping centers, and also the ranging during cold weather. I know there have been examples of installations where you use ultra-wideband as a means of keeping distance from people and so on. So I think there are a lot of interesting use cases to come here in this area.
Thanks, Dag. Luke, anything you want to add in this area as well?
Just rebounding basically on what Dag and Jean-Marie said, I think as we know, GPS doesn't work indoors, and there's been many tries to basically try to replicate the GPS system indoors. If you consider UWB now, you can actually do a lot of different location schemes with UWB, and thanks to the ranging scheme. If we talk about, for example, a mesh network, then you can say, I have a relative positioning. You may be fine with a relative positioning, like, I'm located at this distance from that node and that distance from the other node. And that may be enough for certain systems, in certain use cases. Now, if you add to this mesh network, you add a reference point, an origin, which could be, for example, a GPS receiver right at your door, right? Then suddenly you have an origin, and this mesh network becomes suddenly an absolute locator, right? It gives you the absolute location of the objects, right? And so having a replication of GPS coordinates indoor becomes suddenly possible, right? You just have to mimic or simulate the GPS coordinates indoors, depending on based on your origin, right? So that's one scheme. There's another thing that you can do, for example, in shopping centers. We have typically what we call the reverse TDOA, which is similar to these GPS systems today. Basically, the fixed points, the anchors, would actually broadcast their position, okay? And your phone, for example, will pick their signal from different anchors and do the triangulation, and will be able to locate itself in the shopping mall, for example. So this is another scheme that is possible thanks to the UWB technology, right? So you can do also the other way, which is TDOA. So you have a fixed infrastructure, for example, and then the infrastructure will determine basically the position of the tag. So typically in the latter infrastructure, the tag doesn't know its position, while in the reverse TDOA, the tag would actually be one knowing its position and then send it to the system. So you can imagine different schemes in RTLS. We've been dealing, in DEC, we've been dealing a lot with different companies and interested in very different schemes, such as these ones we described. We have, for example, a few customers who are doing retail, locating, for example, carts when you do your shopping. And we can locate carts with such a precision that you can determine whether you're on one side of a department or the other side of a corridor, basically.
Fantastic. Wow. Thank you. I want to move on and switch gears a little bit here and talk about the automotive industry. We've seen significant adoption or a commitment for adoption of UWB by automotive manufacturers. And UWB has been referenced for multiple different use cases. Apple and BMW are talking about some work together. And the Connected Car Consortium certainly announcing, as you mentioned earlier, the release of digital Key 3 specifications. Could you give us your views on how UWB is driving applications in the automotive sector and how these diverse applications are different or complementary to narrowband technologies? And I'll go ahead and start with you, Luke.
Okay, so first of all, I'd like to say that actually this technology is already present in cars. We've been the first one putting our technology into car access. Right now, it's been in production since 2017 with a British car maker, and so this was basically the paving the way for this technology to be adopted broadly. The reason why it's adopted is because when you combine accurate location with reliable, repeatable measurement, right, then you can rely on your measurement and you can base your security. So the fact that you are close to the car, for example, so that, we're sure that it's not, for example, a signal which has been relayed, okay? So that basically opened the car access market, and the car industry was the first one to pick it up. The car is actually right now entering into a complete revolution period. The car is no longer a car. The car is becoming actually a driving communication device. And if you look at the efforts that the car makers are putting into, what they call ADAS, for example, which is basically assistance to the driver, but also infotainment, which is basically communication with the rest of the world. That is fantastic. UWB is going to be part of that, starting with car access and basically secure access, but also spreading over into, and I'm pretty sure Dag will actually add to that, will morph into, for example, passengers detection systems for safety issues and so on. So clearly, this technology is going to spread into the automotive industry far beyond the car access.
Dag, do you want to jump in on that as well?
Yeah, I think as Luke mentions, the automotive industry and the cars is also a very interesting place to deploy sensing ultra-wideband solutions. And I think what we have seen of use cases is, first of all, the big problem of people actually forgetting children and their pets in the car and they gets overheated and people dies every year. So this is something where you can monitor the car interior and see if there are people there left or people in the car. But also I think monitoring the driver, for instance, for fatigue by analyzing respiration and heartbeat live. It could also do more advanced health analysis. We have projects with car makers looking at this. It's very interesting. And at the end, I think what we'll see is more, in general, using ultra-wideband for advanced human-machine interaction, offering a more seamless interaction between natural movements of the person and the device, car in this example. So I think see a lot of interesting use cases going forward, both for what Luke is mentioning and RTLS, but also for sensing applications. Thanks.
So lots of opportunity there as the car becomes a platform, really, for other innovation. Jean-Marie, anything you want to add?
voice is breaking up a little bit, so I hope it's not my connection.
We can hear you now. You sound good.
It's kind of interesting to see that the same radio technology comes on board a car and is able to tackle completely different use cases with different implementation. And the sensing approach of ultra-wideband that is described by Dag is making a lot of sense, and it can certainly save lives not only of passengers but also of the other road users by checking that the driver is actually not falling asleep. There are a number of transmitters that are taking place, that are installed in the car to make sure that the actual owner of the car is the one who is nearing the car and that the doors can be safely unlocked. It's incredible to see how easy it is to steal a car that is not equipped with ultra-wideband provision against relay attacks. It's incredible. And I must say, Luc, that I have applied for the budget of our company to buy an F-Pace. But unfortunately, this is the only time where I've been refused some benchmark exercise. And I'm again sorry for that. But more seriously, when you look at the number of ultra-wideband transceivers that are getting on board the car, you wonder whether the only applications are going to be the one that we are aware of now. We are talking of car access, digital car keys, which of course has a lot of impact when you think that some people are staying late at the airport to hand over the car keys because a flight has been delayed. If you have a digital car key, there is no longer such problems. But all these transceivers that are coming on board the car, and I think it's public knowledge that there is about 5 to 8 transceivers per car. I cannot help but think that this will be used for much more than that, because we've got so many places where we can measure data that for sure this is going to play a key role in supporting the safe navigation of cars in places where it may not be so obvious, like underground garage and these kind of things. So again, the future lies ahead of us, and we only see the tip of the iceberg at this point in time.
Wow, thank you. So we have about a minute and a half left, and I wanted to do a quick lightning round. So give you all a chance to give your last comments. I do want to do a lead-in, though. Recently, Upload VR, which is a news organization focused on the intersection of people in AR and VR, had a quote about UWB, which I think is really telling. And the quote is, in essence, UWB promises to do at close distance what GPS did for long distance, unlocking a new age of location-aware business applications and opportunities. And so I'd like to ask each of you to give me your best 20-second response to that. And I'll start with Dag.
Yeah, I think it was all mentioned by Jean-Marie, but what we'll see in the future, and this is things ongoing right now, is merging, sensing, ranging, communication, using the same technology. I think that will be a great move forward for the industry. We can utilize the same transmitters, receivers, and also the same kind of transmit power to do a lot of interesting jobs, to collect a lot of information about both to track devices and people, but also to understand the surroundings as a complete technology for understanding the use case. Thanks.
Thanks, Dag. Jean-Marie, 20 seconds.
Here, and I can't help to think that in the future, it will be possible to stick a tag to any kind of object so that it becomes an object that is whose augmented digital twin is available for augmented reality devices, glasses, whatever. And that's also something very exciting.
And Luc, 20 seconds.
Yes, I think I like what Jean-Marie just said. I mean, we have customers who realize, for example, augmented reality with glasses. What UWB adds to vision is basically what you don't see, and you can see what you don't see with augmented reality just because you measure the distance on objects which may be obstructed and so on. it was a little bit short to talk about another subject which UWB technology brings to the party, which is non-line of sight detection. So, but I guess that's going to be another webinar.
I guess we'll have to have another session for that. I want to thank each of our panelists for joining us today for a very robust conversation about ultra wideband and the future. The Ultra Wideband Alliance thanks everyone who joined this panel as a participant and as an audience member. And I just want to remind everybody, UWB is leading the industry in terms of regulatory involvement, and we certainly want to be in touch with you. So follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn. We will also get back to the questions that were asked that we didn't get to in the session and respond to those on our website. So look for those responses. Thank you, everyone. And thank you to the European Spectrum Management Conference.
Thank you.
Thank you.